the global business community faces a shocking lesson. Dutch court freezes Chinese company assets using a 70-year-old Cold War law. A Chinese company spent 6 years reviving a struggling, near-bankrupt Dutch semiconductor firm, growing it into the world's third largest, only to have its entire assets seized by a Dutch court using a 70-year-old Cold War law, leaving just one share as a memento of humiliation. This is not the plot of a gangster movie, but a genuine commercial tragedy that occurred in 2025. Even more absurdly, the entire ruling, from application to enforcement, took only 72 hours, without giving the defendant a chance to appear and respond. The so-called Western rule of law shattered more fragilely than glass at this moment. This incident, when clearly explained, is robbery in the name of the law. The Netherlands used the 1948 Material Supplies Act, originally a zombie law, from the Cold War intended to guard against the Soviet Union. It's like an old box of cold medicine tucked away for decades that should have long expired, but was now pulled out to treat the new ailment of Chinese corporate investment. This maneuver is as preposterous as you buying a second-hand house, living in it for 5 years, and the original owner using a land deed from the country's founding period to sue you for illegal residency, with the court actually ruling in his favor. It is truly mind-numbingly absurd. What is most subversive is that this legal plunder directly exposed the illusion of the global economy. The US announced its new look-through sanctions rule one day, and the Netherlands acted the very next day, without even a 24-hour buffer. This is hardly judicial independence. It is clearly a political show orchestrated by the US and the Netherlands. The consequences are terrifying. The global FDI confidence index plummeted to its lowest level since the 2008 financial crisis. This is equivalent to slamming the brakes on transnational investment, as countless companies suddenly realized their overseas assets could become lambs ready for slaughter at any moment. This stab by the Netherlands cut not only a Chinese enterprise but also the very foundation of global commercial trust. Next, we will dissect how many double standards and ploys of the West are hidden behind this rule of law coup, and how multinational companies can navigate this political vortex to survive, unpacking the arrogance of the Dutch play. Let's dissect the details of this Dutch spectacle to understand its audacity. When Wingitech Technology acquired Nexperia in 2019, the Dutch company was nearly bankrupt, with over 10,000 employees facing uncertainty. It was Wingtech's cash injection and access to the Chinese market that pulled it back from the brink. By 2024, Nexperia's revenue soared to $2.05 billion, 14.7 billion renminbi, making it the world's third largest and China's largest in automotive-grade chips. Yet, after the US placed Wingitech on the Entity List, on September 29, 2025, the Netherlands issued a freezing order on September 30th. The court's final ruling on October 6 was that all Nexperia equity, save for a single share, be put under trusteeship, and the Chinese CEO be directly removed. The entire process was so swift it seemed premeditated. The Amsterdam court even bypassed basic evidence presentation and cross-examination procedures. The so-called procedural justice was not even given lip service. This recalls the US's old playbook against Alstom. In 2014, the US used the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, to arrest Alstom executives, forcing the French company to sell its core business to General Electric at a low price, also citing national security. At the time, the French government protested, but the US ignored it. Now, the Netherlands is directly copying this method, merely swapping US law for a Dutch Cold War law. The greatest irony is that the US and Europe constantly criticize others for not following the rules, yet they are the biggest rule breakers themselves. When political necessity demands it, they can dig up a 70-year-old law as a weapon and trample upon the market economy principles they themselves established. This kind of double standard is more disgusting than outright theft. The Dutch action is essentially a public demonstration of politics overriding business. It believed that hugging the US's leg would bring benefits, but forgot that Nexperia's 80% packaging and testing capacity is in China. If the Wuxi and Dingguan factories stop production, European automakers face an immediate supply cut. Mercedes-Benz and BMW have already started suing Nexperia, and Germany directly warned the Netherlands to compensate for losses. This demonstrates that in a globalized supply chain, no one is isolated. The Netherlands' knife strike against the Chinese company will inevitably lead to its own blood spatter. The so-called national security is merely an excuse. What is truly revealed is the anxiety of the West over China's technological development. They want the Chinese market but fear China's technological rise, resorting to rogue tactics to contain it. Looking at the global chain reaction further reveals the destructive power of this. Rules collapse. Wingitech Technologies stock lost $720 million on the first day of resumed trading, marking the largest single-day drop for a Chinese concept stock. But this is just the surface loss. Bloomberg data shows that in the week following the incident, global multinational companies' inquiries about investing in Europe fell by 42%. Southeast Asia became the preferred safe haven, with rents for foreign invested industrial parks in Vietnam and Malaysia rising by 20%. More alarmingly is the demonstration effect. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has already stated a desire to strengthen foreign investment screening, and Italy quickly followed suit, proposing a national security review for a Chinese company's acquisition of a local robotics firm, citing reasons identical to the Netherlands. The US, meanwhile, follows a double standard of the magistrate may light fires, while the populace is forbidden even to light a lamp. Since 2025, the US has used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, to sanction 32 Chinese tech companies, 15 more than in all of 2024. Yet, when China announced new rare earth export control regulations, requiring reporting for products containing 0.1% or more of Chinese rare earths, the US immediately cried foul, calling it disruption of the supply chain. It's important to note that rare earths are critical materials for chips and lithography machines. ASML's lithography machines cannot operate without Chinese rare earths. The new regulation extended ASML's delivery time from 12 to 18 months, with backlogged orders exceeding 20 billion euros. This is like the US being able to freely lock others' doors but forbidding others from locking their own windows, the height of arrogance. The plummeting global FDI confidence index is essentially a collapse of corporate trust in rule stability. What multinational companies fear most is not competition, but uncertainty, being able to operate legally today, only to have their assets seized tomorrow under a Cold War law. The actions of the US and the Netherlands have effectively blown a hole in the foundation of global commerce. European automakers are already feeling the pain. Ford and General Motors announced production cuts, and Volkswagen urgently increased chip orders in China, settling payments in RMB. This proves that whoever deviates from market laws and engages in political manipulation will be abandoned by the market. The West's attempt to contain China through decoupling and de-risking will ultimately push its own companies into the embrace of the Chinese market. What is most shocking, however, is the double standard in action of Western companies. When McDonald's Israel provided free meals to the Israeli army, its Middle Eastern stores were boycotted and smashed, yet the US called it corporate freedom. But when Chinese companies make legal investments abroad, they are smeared as security threats. Japanese companies like Hitachi and Suntory have now specifically created Chief Geopolitical Risk Officer positions, hiring former diplomats and intelligence officials as consultants, with hourly fees as high as £5,000. Their essential purpose is to deal with the West's rules shift. Even Europe's own companies are guarding against European governments. This is the greatest irony regarding the West's rule of law environment. In contrast, China's countermeasures are both powerful and rule-based. Wingitech Technology directly announced that Nexperia China would operate independently, switch to RMB settlement, and prioritize domestic supply. If European automakers want chips, they must heed the Chinese market. The rare earth control is not a chokehold, but a standardization of exports. After all, China holds 37% of the world's rare earth reserves but undertakes 90% of the processing. Having been subjected to low-price plunder before, it is now merely safeguarding its resource rights. Even smarter is the strategy of punishing the Netherlands to warn Europe, disciplining the Dutch vanguard to let the EU see the consequences. Although von der Leyen is tough talking about countermeasures, the EU has yet to announce concrete measures because they know that a real fallout would first cripple the European economy. China's counterlogic is clear. If you talk politics, I will talk market. If you break the rules, I will protect my own interests. The West always believes it holds the power to set the rules, forgetting that current globalization is you and me and you. Nexperia's wafers come from the Netherlands, but packaging and testing rely on China. European automakers' chips come from Nexperia, but their market is in China. No one can separate from this supply chain. The Netherlands' fantasy of replacing Chinese capacity by building factories in Southeast Asia is detached from reality. Automotive-grade chip certification takes 1 to 2 years, and European automakers cannot wait even a month. This kind of unrealistic fantasy will only lead to the Netherlands' complete displacement in the global supply chain. Now, global companies are reevaluating. When politics overrides rules, how can overseas assets be protected? The answer is quite simple: by tying themselves to the Chinese market. In the third quarter of 2025, Apple and Samsung are increasing investments in China. Apple is shifting some iPhone chip packaging and testing to China, and Samsung is expanding its Xi'an factory with a $10 billion investment. This is because the Chinese market is not only large but also has stable rules and won't randomly reopen old accounts to plunder. An investment fund from Japan's Oryx Capital has 80% of its money invested in Chinese companies, citing, "The Chinese market is the safest." This is the truth revealed by voting with their feet. The West is personally destroying the commercial trust system it built. They used to say, investing in Europe means investing in safety. But the Netherlands has proven that investing in Europe may lead to legal plunder. They used to say, everyone is equal before the law. But now they use a 70-year-old law to discriminate against a Chinese enterprise. This self-defeating behavior is leading more and more countries to push for de-dollarization and de-westernization. ASEAN is already discussing settlement in local currencies, and India and the Middle East are strengthening trade cooperation with China. The price of the West's rule-breaking is becoming apparent globally. Analysis: the essence of business is trust, and the value of rules is stability. The West introducing political struggle into the commercial sphere is like putting poison in the pot. They will ultimately consume it themselves. The Wingitech incident is not an accident, but a signal of globalization's reversal. When the West is no longer the guardian of rules but the destroyer, the global supply chain will inevitably be reshuffled. China insists on openness and cooperation but will never allow itself to be bullied. The lesson of the Netherlands will make more countries realize that confrontation with China will not end well. Only by adhering to rules and pursuing mutual benefit can they survive in globalization.